Eric Burlison. He's not just fighting for freedom, he's fighting for firearms. Congressman Eric Burlison joins us now to talk about how his provision to deregulate suppressors was yanked out of the big, beautiful bill by, wait for it, an unelected Senate Parliamentarian. That's right, not a senator, not even a bureaucrat, basically a hall monitor with a fancy title, just stripped your rights out of a bill with zero accountability. The Honorable Congressman Eric Burlison joining us live right now. Good morning, Congressman. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Austin. Great to be on.
So how does somebody who hasn't been elected by the American people have the authority to override you, someone who has actually been elected to represent your constituents?
It's a mystery to me, and I'm not in the Senate, so I don't exactly understand the rules, but the way I understand it is that because we're operating under reconciliation and there are rules that are called the Byrd rules in that process, this parliamentarian gives that individual the authority to do so. And the question is, how big of a fight is the Senate and Senate leadership willing to put up against this parliamentarian? Because look, the parliamentarian threw out a lot of provisions, and you can tell which ones Senate leadership actually wants to pass because they will tweak the language, send it back through, tweak it again, send it back through, whatever it takes until they pass that language. This time around, unfortunately, all they did was tweak it to reduce the price down to zero for these federal tax stamps, which means that you're still going to have to register for your suppressor and register for a short barreled and for a short barreled shotgun, but the price, the tax stamp won't, instead of being $200, will be zero.
So sounds great. Thank you for trying. We certainly appreciate it. It was the only thing that I was looking forward to in the big, beautiful bill. Everything else looks pretty terrible, like your typical pork-laden bill that drives up the deficits. I think $3.3 trillion over the next decade is what I'm hearing from Senator Rand Paul. But what exactly would deregulating suppressors do for law-abiding gun owners and for manufacturers?
Oh, it would be fantastic. You'll see a revolution happen within the firearms industry. I mean, the creativity and the opportunity for individuals. I have a feeling that most people would no longer buy a firearm that wasn't suppressed. They would probably be included in the purchase. You would also have a lot more opportunities for people to 3D print one. They could, you'd have a lot of people that suddenly would be able to start manufacturing suppressors that weren't before, because now they've got to go through and be an official, firearms dealer. Basically, suppressors are relegated to being, something that's not a firearm. And so it would really revolutionize the industry.
Certainly, I would love to see it. My neighbors would love to see it. I live on 5.5 acres, and I'm just in the county, so I have neighbors. And whenever I shoot firearms, I get a visit from the Cole County Sheriff because the neighbors are reporting all of the gunfire. It sounds like World War III going on here. It's not Ukraine in your backyard. I'd love to have to be able to purchase a suppressor to be able to use it. Also because for those who know, if you have a short-barreled rifle, or if you have a pistol with a pistol brace, and it is a shorter rifle, then the blast makes it extremely obnoxious and extremely loud. So if you wanted to use a rifle for home defense, and you ever, God forbid, had to use it in your own home, you wouldn't just blast the bad guys. You'd probably lose your hearing as well. So there's a lot of safety reasons, as well as just, not being a public nuisance reasons for having a suppressor on your firearm, aren't there?
That's right. That's 100% right. This is, a lot of the left and their views about suppressors are misguided and misinformed. They're not exactly silent like they are in James Bond movies. They are still loud. Anybody that's ever fired suppressed understands that you can still hear it. It's pretty loud, sometimes really loud still. But that's what they've keyed in on some 1980s movies, and that's what they're focused on. That's what they legislate based off of. So I think that if you want to protect hearing, And at the end of the day, the suppressor isn't a lethal object itself. It, it is nothing without the firearm. And I think that it's ridiculous to make a part that you can attach to a firearm illegal.
I'm speaking to Congressman Eric Burlison from Southwest Missouri this morning. If you have a question for him, drop it in the chat below or send us a text at 573-319-1586. We're speaking about his amendment to the big, beautiful bill, which would have deregulated suppressors for firearms. It's called the Hearing Protection Act that he added into the bill that was removed by a Senate Parliamentarian in the 11th hour. Why do you think that this amendment was targeted for removal? Do you think that it was pure politics?
I suspect that it was. I think that Senate leadership probably didn't want to have it come to a vote, and so it's very easy for them to be able to protect members. So if a moderate member, a group of moderate members of the Republican Party, if you can imagine their position, they don't want to come out and have a vote against the Second Amendment, and so they wanted to hide behind the parliamentarian and then their ruling. And so that's my guess, is that, and this is not based on insider knowledge, it's just based on how the policies and the political dynamics work. It's, the most obvious conclusion, and the fact that they didn't fight really hard, the parliamentarian, suggests to me that they probably had enough members that they didn't want to put in a bad vote. And this is what leadership always does. They're more worried about protecting the moderates and really giving the shaft to conservatives than anything. And so this is one more example of where they've let us down.
Congressman, will you reintroduce this provision in a separate bill, or what's next for restoring our suppressor rights?
Yeah, so once it gets taken down to zero, which hopefully that does stay in the bill, then we can at least, I think Andrew Clyde and I are working on some form of legislation, or maybe get the president to do an executive order where they're no longer going to enforce the registration. So that could be a possibility. In fact, that may be part of our negotiations with the president when it comes to final passage of this bill. And then in addition, we could file language to make it permanent, so that the next administration can't, through executive order, suddenly require people to start re-registering these items. So there is stuff that we can do. I think that, and I'm trying to give a little bit of a silver lining here, is that by reducing the tax down to zero, it puts us in a good position to be able to fight to just eliminate the registration, particularly if we can get the executive order. Because if you're basically passing a bill that doesn't really change the dynamic of status quo, that it's, as you understand, that's politically a lot easier for some people to swallow.
Congressman, on another topic, same subject, the question about the big, beautiful bill. Is it true that taxpayers are going to be on the hook for medical bills for illegal aliens as a part of this bill?
Right now, it appears like that portion they have not been able to put back into the bill. So I think that it's still in play. They're trying to figure out a way to get that through the parliamentarian. But yeah, the money that's going to illegals through SNAP and others has been thrown out. So we're trying to get. I think the Senate is actually looking to try to find some way of putting those two back in.
Congressman, once they removed the suppressors portion from the big, beautiful bill, there wasn't a lot for people like myself to get excited about, other than perhaps extending the tax cuts, the 2017 Trump tax cuts. How do you feel about the bill overall? Your thoughts on it? If it comes back to you, you vote for it. I mean, tell us your overall feeling about the big, beautiful bill, because Senator Rand Paul and Elon Musk, who I'm big fans of, they kind of got me freaked out about it, to be quite honest. And I don't have time to read it. That's your job. So you tell me your thoughts on the thing.
Yeah, I agree with Elon and Rand Paul at this point, because look, we sent over a bill from the House. Fiscal hawks fought tooth and nail, and I mean, got really, really angered our leadership in the House, angered the White House, but we got them to agree that at the minimum, if you're going to extend all these tax cuts and add new tax cuts, we have to pay for it and not increase the deficit. So that's what we sent over. It wasn't perfect, but at least it wasn't blowing up the deficit. And we were able to get all these tax cuts, which I think, keeping the government small, reducing it, shrinking it down so that it can be controlled is better than continuing to allow it to collect your money and my money. But at the end of the day, I don't want to blow up the debt and I don't want to increase the deficit. So that's how it left the House. The Senate took what we did and then they accelerated on the tax cuts. They added more tax cuts that they're not paying for, and then they reduced the savings that we had sent over. So they reduced the savings on the Green New Deal, eliminating the Green New Deal tax credits. They reduced some of the other savings that we had in Medicaid. And as a result, the estimates on how much it's going to increase our debt, national debt over the next 10 years is anywhere between 1.3 trillion and the Democrats say it's going to be more closer to 4. I think it's probably, they're not including any kind of economic growth from cutting taxes, which is why it's 4, but I think it's probably closer to 1.3. Look, I'm not going to vote for it until that gets down.
I mean, do you believe the White House's projections that the cuts that are being made to taxes in one way will be made up for with the additional revenue that will come in from tariffs?
But there could be money that's coming in from tariffs, and to me that should be icing on the cake, if you will. But it's really not something that it's not going to be in the bill. It shouldn't be counting for reconciliation. And look, if we bring in extra money through tariffs, that's a good thing. Maybe we start actually paying down the deficit, paying down the debt. And so I'm going to fight to get to deficit neutrality on these tax cuts, which I think will put us in a much better position so that if we were able to get to the discretionary spending when it comes to implementing the DOGE cuts, and then also any revenue that we're going to bring in through tariffs would help to reduce the deficit even more.
Do you think it's accurate to say that this bill helps middle-class Americans, or do you think that this leans more towards corporate tax relief and industry-specific carve-outs?
Yeah, so I have a nuanced answer to that. It's yes and no. So when it comes to the tax cuts, the middle-class tax cut, extending the Trump tax cuts, is going to absolutely benefit the middle class. Adding no taxes on tip, no tax on overtime, absolutely is going to improve the middle class. The SALT deduction does not. They're increasing. This is one of the biggest fights. The reason why this bill is so expensive is because they've given in to the New York and California delegation, the SALT caucus, and they are raising the SALT deduction from $10,000 to $40,000. And it just has a huge fiscal cost to it. Trump didn't want it. He doesn't campaign on SALT, increasing the SALT deduction. And look, my constituents in Missouri are not, by and large, there's very few that would benefit from this because we're in a low tax state. And I don't know a whole lot of people that are paying that level of taxes in Missouri. So I think that it's clear that it benefits New Yorkers and Californians, but all these blue states. So that is not good for the middle class. The other thing that's not good for the middle class, when it comes to the Green New Deal tax credits, I agree with Elon. The irony is we are repealing immediately the tax credits that benefit individuals. So for example, the EV tax credit, I've never used that. I would never, I'm not an EV guy, but there's a lot of middle-class people that are buying electric vehicles and benefit from that tax credit. The residential solar tax credit, there's a lot of people, middle-class people that benefit from that. The irony is that by not repealing the whole thing altogether, only repealing those things that benefit middle-class individuals, it's really truly the opposite of MAGA, because what they're doing is they're leaving in place all the green tax credits that benefit the monopoly utility companies. that benefit large corporations that want to use carbon sequestration credits. All of, it benefits the ethanol industry, big farming. And at the same time, it's, in my opinion, it's kind of immediately giving the shaft to the middle class.
One last question for you, Congressman, before we let you go, and we appreciate your time today. I received a message yesterday. Somebody said that they were really excited to hear from you about this topic. They had said that the apparently President Trump was briefed about tall white hybrid aliens that walk among us, known as Nordics or Pleiadians, and whatever is sending the grays are thousands of years ahead of us. I have no idea what any of that means. But here's what it says. Congressman Eric Burlison revealed in an X space that David Grush gave a briefing to Trump that there are aliens who walk among us that are a few hundred years ahead of human technology, can easily blend into our society. Sounds like science fiction. Help me understand this, Congressman. What is this all about?
Yeah, this is what happens when you have people on Twitter that think that they're journalists. Here's the thing. Let me make it very clear. First of all, David Grush did not brief the president on this.
Okay.
I have heard from multiple people that Trump was briefed, and the joke is that when he was briefed that there were hybrid aliens, that he joked that one of them must be Adam Schiff. And so whether or not it's true, I can't, look, I'm on the pursuit to determine what is true within this UFO phenomenon. And until I see a Nordic alien myself, I'm not gonna say that they exist.
If there is an alien, though, it's definitely Adam Schiff, maybe Nancy Pelosi. Congressman, is there anything else that we missed that you'd like to share with our audience? We do have several of your constituents who are listening to the show this morning, maybe eager to hear from you about anything you're working on or anything you'd like to plug before we let you go today.
No, I just want to say, some of the bills on the Second Amendment that I'm filing are one to repeal the National Firearms Act altogether, just bracket out the whole law, and then also a bill to abolish the ATF. And so I'm working to that end. Yes. And I mean, abolish it. Don't move it into a different agency, just abolish it altogether. So those are things that I think that I'm working on, in addition to a lot of legislation that benefits, middle America. So for example, privacy rights. Myself and Mike Lee are working on a bill that you might find interesting that basically, and we're starting with your car, because there's nothing more, liberty oriented than the American car, right? But many people don't understand that our car makers right now your car is now a surveillance instrument, surveilling you and selling your data to the highest bidder. And so car companies, if you're driving a new car, especially one that is run by a computer screen, you probably are being tracked. They're selling how fast you drive, how fast you stop and accelerate, where you go to your insurance company. And could be worse. Imagine if your sheriff could purchase your driving history from the market. So this is something that myself and Mike Lee are trying to put some clarity in and say, you have to have consent from the owner that created the data before you are able to release that to anybody else.
Congressman Eric Burlison, thank you so much for your tireless defense of our individual liberty. We know that the best congressmen, they come from Missouri. Thanks for what you're doing on the suppressors. Please keep pushing on that one. That's definitely something we're very excited about. Our listeners are excited about. And thank you for clearing up the misinformation about the aliens. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go correct those Twitter journalists.
Please. Yes, please correct that.
We will do that, Congressman. You have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Have a good one and a safe flight.
You too, Austin.